Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bull Take Scouting Podcast. It's been a few weeks since we were last on the stream, and a lot has happened around the league. There's been a lot of notable rookie performances, and one really big thing that we want to talk about is this incredible play of two rookie cornerbacks, Ahmad Sauce Gardner for the New York Jets, and one who was drafted a lot later, Tariq Woolen, for the Seattle Seahawks. And we got to thinking, how do they rank among the top cornerbacks in the league? Because one thing that really caught our eye was Daniel Jeremiah tweeted the other day that he currently has both in his top 5 cornerbacks in the NFL. So, given how well they've played, Alex, where do these guys rank for you?
Let's start off from the top. I have Patrick Surtain as my number one cornerback in the league, followed by Jalen Ramsey. I think Ramsey just took a little bit of a step back this year, and Surtain's really, in my opinion, the best corner in the league. And then after that, I have Jair Alexander for the Packers at number 3. Sauce comes in at number 4 for me. I think he's definitely a top 5 cornerback in the league. I think that the 3 that I mentioned before him just have a little bit more experience. You saw Sauce's lack of experience come out the first play against the Bills when he gave up that 42-yard pass to Diggs. Other than that, he was shut down in that game, or he was shut down his opponents in that game. But you just saw him, maybe he was in zone, kind of cheating a little bit, watching Josh Allen, and Diggs just blew by him. But, I mean, he obviously corrected his mistake. But, again, just little minute details and experience is what has Sauce at 4 behind those 3 guys for me.
Yeah, I've actually got Sauce at 4 in my rankings as well. I have a slightly different order. I think Jalen Ramsey is still the best cornerback in the league. He had a really rough week 1, I think, just because it was the opening night on that Thursday night football game against the Buccaneers. A lot of people just assume that he's taken a step back, but I think he's been really great since then. And so I think he maintains the top spot for me. After that, I've got Patrick Surtain, Darius Slay at 3. And I'll actually go ahead and put Ahmad Gardner at 4 ahead of Jair Alexander. I think Gardner has been incredible. Week in and week out, we're seeing these stats of he's allowing 1 catch for 8 yards or something like that. Yeah, he allowed that 42-yarder to Diggs, but that was really the first big catch he had allowed all season. He also had a pick in that game. And I've seen a lot of people complain about his grabbiness and, that there could be some PI calls on him. I think you see those calls go in favor of the cornerback very often around the league, and people are kind of just pushing it onto Sauce because, whenever you've got a star, you're always going to have a minority that wants to kind of drag them down and oppose everyone else. I think Sauce Gardner is a fantastic cornerback, and one of his best attributes is his physicality and his ability to be physical without drawing those PI flags. That's something that I saw consistently on tape when he was at Cincinnati, and that's something we're still seeing in the NFL. So that's why, for me, he is already halfway through his rookie season, the number 4 cornerback in the NFL to me.
Yeah, 100%. And just to touch on his physicality a little bit more, it's not over-the-top grabbiness. Mm-hmm. It's a little pinch of the jersey here or there where, refs, 1, can't really see that, and 2, you can't really throw the flag. It's a lot of hand fighting back and forth with the wide receivers, but I rarely, if ever, see him just blatantly grab a wide receiver and just hold him back. It's, a little pushing, a little shoving back and forth between him and the wide receiver. And like you mentioned, his physicality was what makes him so good. And I think it's worth mentioning, he is physical in the run game as well. He has 44 total tackles, which is just kind of rare to see from a cornerback get as involved in the run game as Sauce does. So to me, he's really a complete cornerback, run game, pass game, football IQ, everything's there. So he's a special player.
I totally agree. I've got coming in at 6, AJ Terrell, 7, Xavier Howard. And I'll go ahead and put Tariq Woolen number 8. He's a top 10 cornerback already in the league, in my opinion. He's tied for 2nd in the league with 4 interceptions, tied for 9th with 8 pass breakups. He's just such a special cornerback that is going to keep getting better and better. I mean, this is a guy with maybe the rarest physical profile that we have ever seen. That he is 6'4", and he's probably the fastest player in the NFL at 6'4", which is just absolutely unreal. He's got good fluidity. He can jump for days. It's impressive, and I think he's still just learning the position because he only played, I think, 2 years of cornerback at UTSA. Tariq Woolen is going to be a very, very good player, and I think he's already a top 10 cornerback in the NFL.
Yeah, I actually also have him at 8. And, you mentioned his speed to me is his biggest attribute, along with his ball skills. He played wide receiver before he played cornerback, and that really shows with his 4 interceptions. He has a knack for, picking the football up out of the air. And you see his length, right? You mentioned he was 6'4". He also can make a lot of pass breakups as well with his long arms. But you see him get beat off the line occasionally, but he can make that up with his speed.
Oh yeah.
So he's got great closing speed when that ball is thrown. So again, another really impressive corner with great physical traits. And like you mentioned, he's still learning the position, so I just expect him to get better. And I'm sure within the next few seasons, he'll also be a top 5 cornerback in the league.
Absolutely. Man, let's talk about that Seahawks draft class now, though. I mean, I think there are 2 reasons why they're currently surprising everyone and they're leading the NFC West. One is the incredible resurgence of Geno Smith into a quality NFL quarterback. I mean, props to him for his play. He's been outstanding. And the other is the contributions they've been getting from this rookie class already. They picked Charles Cross, who's had a rough first or 1 or 2 games, but then he's been really good since then. Boye Mafe in the second round has shown impact as a rotational pass rusher, and he's a guy I really like that I think is really athletic and is just going to get better in the next few years in the league. Kenneth Walker is taking the league by storm and could definitely win Offensive Rookie of the Year from the running back position. Abraham Lucas is a rock-solid pass protector at right tackle. Kobe Bryant, who they got in the 4th round, leads the league with 4 forced fumbles. And then you've got Tariq Woolen in the 5th round. So that's 6 stars and contributors that they've already have halfway through this rookie draft class's first year in the NFL. Can you believe how good this draft class was?
If you could give a grade better than an A+, that's what I would give the Seahawks. They crushed the draft. Obviously, Charles Cross has been a great pick after his first few, rough games, totally normal as you transition to the NFL. But to me, the star of the show, other than Tariq Woolen, is Kenneth Walker.
Oh, yeah.
I think his rushing ability has helped that offense make it to heights that they probably wouldn't have been able to get to without him. And my question to them is, Kenneth Walker wasn't supposed to start when the season started. How were you going to keep him off the field?
I know.
I know Rashad Penny was a good running back last year. He was not Kenneth Walker, all due respect to Rashad Penny. How are you going to be able to keep him off the field? We saw what happened when he got that RB1 spot after Penny unfortunately got injured. But he's just a dynamic playmaker with home run speed, and he's got great physicality as well.
I want to give Penny his credit because he did explode at the end of last year. He had a 5-game stretch that rivals what Kenneth Walker is doing right now, but he was not as effective at the start of this season. And I am surprised that it took a season-ending injury from him for Kenneth Walker to jump in there. But I think it was really crucial that Walker popped, right at that point because Geno Smith had a great first few games. And I was wondering, is this just, a hot stretch and he's going to fizzle out as teams start game planning more against him than they were the first few weeks. I think he was really hitting a crossroads in the season about 4 to 5 weeks in where he needed to really just confirm that he was going to be that guy the rest of the season and allow the Seahawks to make a strong playoff push. And I think Kenneth Walker's emergence really helped him do that because I 1,000% think that Geno Smith is going to keep playing like this the rest of the year and the Seahawks are going to be in the playoffs. They could definitely win that division, honestly, because Geno Smith's ability to manage that offense at the quarterback position and Kenneth Walker starring at running back has made the offense really good. And I want to say also props to Pete Carroll for putting all the pieces together in a big transition year for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I mean, part of this was able to happen because they traded Russell. Obviously, Geno as the starter has played better than Russell this year and better than Russell played last year. But they wouldn't have had that first-round pick if they kept Russell. Yeah. And, I mean, that offensive line was not great at all last year. And I think Charles Cross, as we mentioned, he's a starter for them, really helping that offensive line step up, as well as Abe Lucas. I mean, he kind of stepped in from the start of the season, has been the other starter at tackle on that offensive line. And just it's crazy that they got six starters or impact players like you mentioned this early on. Like we've seen draft classes in the past where after a couple years, guys, become starters 2-3 years down the road. But to have this many impact guys halfway through the rookie year is just wild. And John Schneider deserves a lot of credit for what he did.
Yeah, I think this might be the best draft class since the Saints. I want to say 2017 draft class when they had Ryan Ramczyk, Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, Marcus Williams. I think a couple other starters beyond that. I think that, and long term, this draft class could rival that draft class. It was really a great draft class, and what really piques my interest about it is the last few years we've seen the Seahawks continuously reach on players, and it seems like they have their own philosophy of evaluating NFL draft prospects, and they're not afraid that if a guy is high on their board, even if he's not at that draft stock in the league's consensus, they'll go ahead and take him. It results in a lot of busts, like, for example, Marquise Blair was taken before they took DK Metcalf a few years back. They took LJ Collier in the first round. They kind of became known to us as a team that was going to make some head scratching picks every year. But then this year, it's not just that these players have been fantastic for them so far. Each of these guys was projected to go in the range they got them or even higher. So what do you think? Do you think anything spurned this change in philosophy by the Seahawks, or is it not really that there's a change in philosophy and their scouting just seemed to align with everyone else's this year?
I'm going to go with the latter. I mean, Schneider and Carroll have been working together for, what is it, at least 12 years now. I don't think your scouting department makes a complete 180 in 1 or 2 years like that. They've clearly been able to pick out some talent. I just think maybe their boards in the past have been a little too thin, and they didn't want to trade out, and that forced them to reach on a guy. But we have seen them, draft talent in the past, like you mentioned, DK Metcalf. And I think, this year, obviously great scouting. And it's a little bit of luck where the guys they wanted also fell to them,
Yeah.
not taking anything away, but, Woolen was drafted in the 5th round. Another team could have taken him before the Seahawks got to them. So really good scouting and guys that they liked falling to their picks.
Yeah, I would agree with that take. All right, do you want to turn to another big talking point that we have planned here? It's not to do with this rookie class, but, what we love doing is keeping track of the rookies. And then, once we move on from their rookie year, given that we're primarily a scouting service, we let them ride off into the sunset, have their NFL careers, and we don't really talk about them too much. But I think the 2021 quarterback class was such a massive headline. It's such a big deal with 5 guys going in the first round that we've got to talk about them one more time here. Is it time to panic a little bit about this draft class? Because nobody's really emerged as a surefire franchise quarterback yet, 1.5 years in. What's your take on that?
No, don't panic. Don't for the class as a whole, no. I think there are a couple that we'll get to that I am a little bit nervous about for 2 different reasons. So do we want to start with the building up to the first overall pick or going first overall pick down?
We can go first overall pick down. I'll tell you that I wouldn't panic yet, but I'm getting worried.
About Trevor Lawrence?
Well, about the class as a whole. And Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going to be a franchise quarterback. I think he's going to be the Jaguars' starter for as long as he wants to be. But I don't think he's going to be the superstar that we were envisioning. If he was going to become the best quarterback in this league, as he was being sold to everyone as a generational prospect, I think we'd be seeing more than we are from him right now.
I agree. I think that he'll still have potential to be franchise quarterback, like you mentioned. He really doesn't have a lot of help around him. Let's be honest. ETN was a great pick. I love the pairing, college teammates. But I mean, Christian Kirk, I feel like he hasn't really lived up to that $20 million plus contract that the Jaguars gave him. I understand that they were the Jaguars. They probably had to overpay a little bit, but I don't really think he has a true wide receiver one. Um, and I haven't watched too many Jaguars games to tell you how the scheme has helped or hindered his ability to find open wide receivers. But just because of the lack of top end talent for these wide receivers, um, I'm just gonna err on the side of he doesn't have a ton of help with the Jaguars. But the thing that does concern me a little bit about Lawrence is I feel like he takes steps, one step forward, two steps
Yeah.
back, one step forward, two steps back. And we see him make some really poor decisions. We saw it, in the London game. I think he struggled a little bit with decision making, and I couldn't really pick out why he made those decisions. And I think we might get to some other quarterbacks later where they made some poor decisions, but I can understand it. To me, it was just like, I don't even know what you saw with some of the interceptions in that London game.
Yeah, to me, he looks like a quarterback who still hasn't adjusted to suddenly being on a level playing field with everyone else. In high school and in college at Clemson, he had the better team than the opponent almost every single game that he played in his career. And that's why he won almost every single game he played in his career. And we kind of assumed he's going to come in the NFL. And even if he's on a really bad team, he's going to be able to elevate that team. And there was a bigger adjustment there than I think we realized. And I wonder if we know very well that last year he was in a horrible situation with Urban Meyer. I mean, that was just very odd behavior from an NFL head coach that definitely didn't help an a young NFL quarterback. I wonder if he's still kind of struggling to get over that because now I think you might be underselling the Jaguars a little bit. They've got a Super Bowl winning head coach who's in charge of the offense. Travis Etienne is playing incredible right now. The wide receiver core could be better, but it's not that bad. The O line is fine. It's nothing bad either. I think he has a better supporting cast than Justin Fields does, than Davis Mills does, and maybe even better than Mac Jones does. I think the biggest problem is that he's not being able to overcome the great difference in talent gap that he had in college compared to now.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think, like you mentioned, at Clemson, his team around him is better than every single team he was playing, pretty much. And I'd argue, still right now in year two, most of the time he's playing a team overall that's better than the team he's on. So I think he needs to elevate his players, and I haven't really seen too much of that.
Yeah. What is your take on Zach Wilson? I know both of us loved Zach Wilson. He was our QB2 in the draft class, but man, he has not been playing well so far, a year and a half into his career.
So, as a Jets fan, I hear a lot of noise about Jets fans calling for Zach Wilson's job, saying that he sucks. He's the worst quarterback in the league, and I want to push back on that a little bit. He hurt his knee in the preseason. He had no practice, no preseason, missed the first 4 games of the season. He was dropped in playing some of the best defenses in the NFL. He played the Broncos. He played the Packers, who have last time I saw a few weeks ago, they were the number 1 ranked pass defense in the league. They had a horrible run defense, so what did the Jets do? They ran the ball. They went with the strength of their team. Obviously, the Patriots, Bill Belichick can scheme up some really good defensive game plans, especially against Jets quarterbacks. The Bills, I think he played well in the Dolphins game. And the Steelers also have a really good defense. So I don't think he's had any gimme games playing a defense. And he basically missed 7 weeks before he was dropped into the games. Now, has he made a lot of poor decisions? Yes, look no further than the Patriots game to see those. I'd say those last 2 interceptions. The first one, he was throwing off his back foot with pressure in his face, and it just went over the running back. Stuff like that's going to happen once in a while. But what I see from Zach Wilson is the talent is 100% there. He can escape pressure really well and extend plays where I'd say a lot of other quarterbacks would take sacks. his biggest issue to me is he doesn't want to give up on the play, which is a positive and a negative, right? He's always looking to extend the play. And he mentioned in one of his press conferences, he doesn't want to just throw the ball away after doing all that work. And to me, he just needs to learn that it's okay to take an incompletion, throwing the ball out of bounds. I still have a lot of hope for him because I see plays where he has great accuracy, great ball placement, a great arm, great athleticism. It's just those, I want to call it the gunslinger mentality, the Brett Favre mentality, where he's just launching that ball up, something that would pass 15, 20 years ago that doesn't pass now. So that's my take on it. I think he deserves all of this year, all of next year. He's playing behind a depleted offensive line as well. So I think just give him some time and he'll get the hang of it and the Jets will get going.
Yeah, I definitely want to believe in him because his last season of college football at BYU was the second best season from a quarterback prospect that I've ever watched, right after Joe Burrow's legendary 2019 season with LSU. Zach Wilson was incredible in every aspect: processing the field, accuracy, ball placement, ability to evade pressure, but he was walking on water that year, which is incredible for him, but I think has been his downfall in the NFL. Is that year at BYU, everything he tried worked. Whenever he never had to throw the ball away because everything worked. He was playing out of his mind. Then he got to the NFL, and I don't think he's been able to adjust. And I kind of gave him a pass for his rookie season because it makes sense that he had suffered through that adjustment, but I'm not seeing the step forward that I should be seeing from him. How can I be confident right now that he is going to learn to throw the ball away, that he is going to get out of that hero ball mentality? I just haven't seen him cut down on it enough from year one to year two, when I'm sure he was being told all offseason that was maybe his biggest issue. So that's why I'm starting to get worried, is why isn't he improving yet in that respect?
Yeah. What I would say is I think he's played 19 career games. Obviously, he got hurt towards the end of last year, the beginning of this year. He's 22 years old. Josh Allen didn't play well until his third year. I think for me, it's not Wilson making poor reads and not being able to process the field. It's when no one's open, I don't want to throw the ball away. That's what we saw on both his interceptions and some other poor throws. So to me, that's it. If he can figure that out, I think he's good. If not, obviously we're gonna have a problem.
Yeah. Moving on to the next few guys in that class. Trey Lance, my concern is just that he hasn't been able to play football. He's a guy who, because the FCS didn't have a season in 2020, he only played one exhibition game, and then he sat through most of 2021, and then he got hurt out for the year in 2022. He's just barely played football, and he's a guy who really needed to play football because as much talent as he had, he was still a raw prospect coming out, and it's just a shame that he hasn't been able to get experience under his belt.
I mean, he's played one season of football at the college level. Obviously, they had that COVID year. He sat out his rookie year, and now this year he hasn't played football besides 2 games in 3 seasons. And like you mentioned, he's a super raw prospect to me coming out. He has the physical tools, but I feel like it's going to be really hard for him to transition coming from the FCS level, not having played football in 3 years for the most part. It's a really tough situation.
I agree. Justin Fields is starting to flash. I'm glad for him. I just wouldn't get fully on board with the breakout just yet because it's largely due to him running the ball more, which is very good. He should be running the ball more. He's an incredible running threat, as evidenced by him breaking the record for rushing yards in a regular season game by a quarterback. But I still haven't seen him take the step forward in terms of his internal clock and processing the football field fast enough. And that's really the biggest problem in his game right now. If he can't improve that, then I don't think he can be a franchise quarterback. I really like Justin Fields coming out, but I still need to see him improve that before I can get sold and jump on the hype train right now.
I think his rushing ability will allow him to develop into a good, possibly franchise quarterback. Like you mentioned, I think he still has some things to fix. But to me, it's similar in a way to Lamar Jackson. Justin Fields' rushing ability will allow him to win games, allow him to, escape the pocket and run for a first down when no one's open, and allow him to develop as a passer. We know we were not fans of Lamar Jackson as a passer coming out, even after his first year. And even in his second year, I would argue that he made a lot of poor, inaccurate throws when he won that MVP. Now, I think he is a much better passer, but his ability to run allowed him to stay a starting quarterback, allowed the team to stay successful, and allowed him to develop as a passer. And I wouldn't be surprised if Justin Fields follows a similar trajectory.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you bring up because the advantage to being able to run the football is that you get to develop through the growing pains. You don't need to get benched because there's another way for you to get yardage and to win some games in the meantime. The last two guys, Davis Mills, he played well in the back end of last year, but he wasn't a guy that either of us thought had the tools to be a franchise quarterback. And I think we're seeing now that he can't really elevate a team to that extent. And then meanwhile, Mac Jones has almost been the anomaly to me this year because he was the best rookie quarterback, in my opinion, last year. And he's taking a big step back in a department that was always a strength for him, and that's decision making. Where I'm just too often seeing him put the ball in danger, as evidenced by his high interception numbers, and he's got to really cut that out. I would say though that he's not being done benefits by the Patriots' offensive coaching staff right now. I don't really know why Matt Patricia and Joe Judge are calling the offense together. I think that's just Bill Belichick liking his guys and giving them positions, even though there should be someone better. Going from Josh McDaniels to those two calling the offense might be the reason why he's taking a step back, and I hope it just doesn't hinder his development into a franchise quarterback, which it looked like he was going to become last year.
Yeah, I think, after the end of the season, he did struggle the last few games, obviously against Buffalo. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of carried through into the start of this season. To me, I'm wondering a little bit because it was always the lack of mobility for both of us that concerned him. We don't need a quarterback to rush for 100 yards a game, but just to be able to move a little bit.
Well, he can, honestly. He's been able to get some yards on the ground the last few weeks. I've been impressed by it. I don't think that's the issue.
To a point, I think. But I'm wondering if just similar to Brady, where if there's pressure in his face, that's how you beat him. And I agree. It's been shocking to see the poor decisions that he's made because, like you mentioned, that was his strong suit. It was reading the field quickly, getting the ball out quickly, and he's just not doing it this year. And like you mentioned, it could be due to the offensive coaching staff that the Patriots have.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that can sum up this segment. And it's pretty much a mixed bag. I think you're right that we shouldn't panic just yet, but we do have some concerns for each of these guys, and I am intrigued to see if anyone can really take the big step forward either through the remainder of this year or heading into next year. I think it'll especially be in their third year that someone really takes off, maybe a couple guys, but we'll keep our eyes on that draft class for sure. Now, I wanted to ask you an interesting question. Last year, there was a wide receiver prospect that we really liked in the draft because he was a really well-rounded guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a pretty quiet first half of the season, and then he absolutely exploded. And he was one of the best wide receivers in football during the second half of the season. Now, do you think there's anyone that is on the cusp of that same breakout for the rest of the season in this rookie draft class?
I think Chris Olave has showed some potential. I mean, he's been one of the top two rookie wide receivers, but he hasn't been standout like Amon-Ra St. Brown was in the second half of his rookie season. I think both Olave and Garrett Wilson, we saw some really good connections between Zach Wilson and Garrett Wilson over the past 2-3 weeks. I think either of those guys, especially if Jameis Winston comes back for the Saints, you never know. Winston could throw some deep balls to Olave, and that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I think I could see definitely Garrett Wilson really taking off as he builds rapport with Zach Wilson. I think he could really explode. One guy who, if we're going to go the level of St. Brown, who has barely produced his first half of his rookie year, I think James Cook could be the one who, He's barely getting on the field. He only has a few touches every game. What if the Bills really unleash him the second half of the year and just out of nowhere, he gets an opportunity, he takes it, runs with it, and he's their guy the rest of the season? That one I could see. I'm not sure it's going to happen because he's really kind of buried right now on that depth chart, not getting that many touches. They did also just trade for Naheem Hines, but he's a talented guy, and I think if he gets the opportunity, he could really pop the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think if given the opportunity, he could. Just the confusing thing for me is scouting him, I was really impressed with his receiving ability,
Yeah.
but to me, he hasn't really been on the field for the Bills too much when they're in obvious passing situations. So I'm just a little confused. I know he had that fumble in the first game of the season, and to me, we really haven't seen him too much since. I think if given the opportunity, like you said, he definitely could break out, but I just don't know if the Bills are ready for him yet.
Yeah, thinking about it, the Bills under Sean McDermott haven't really used running backs in the passing game that much. So it's puzzling that they would have spent a second rounder on James Cook if they weren't really planning on utilizing him fully in what he does best, which is receiving. But maybe along the time that passes, they're going to realize that that's the best way he can help this team, and they're going to really start using him that way.
Yeah, and I think that could end up being a fatal flaw for the Bills, not using the running back position and relying too much on Josh Allen.
Yeah, I agree.
With that said, I think that wraps up our halfway through the season rookie review. Thanks everyone for watching, listening. We'll be back again in 4 or so weeks for 3/4 of the way through the season. Hoping to see some more rookies break out and continue their really good rookie seasons.